Okay, so today I'm going to tell a story. Even if it might seem a bit convoluted at a time, I will ask everybody to suspend disbelief till the end and maintain the magic. Computers have very quickly evolved from very fast calculators to tools augmenting our intelligence and our creative potential. Within their own computational kingdom, one, like as a computer user, can be seen as a very powerful wizard. Wizard wielding general computational machines that can be programmed to implement any process. And computers have always worked extremely well as personal devices, especially in the early days of computing, where pioneers like Alan Kay and Doug Engelbart were focused on personal computational ecosystems where different programs could coexist and interact together through composition. And then the internet happened. The internet is simple and robust, but I think it's very blind to a lot of inherent subtleties of human communication. There has not been, in my opinion, a redesign from personal computing to societal computing. And given the presence of bad actors on the internet, I think it became pretty clear that just connecting computers naively, allowing any program on any machine to write the memory of any other machine would not work. It just does not survive against bad actors. And so instead, the internet was just designed as a way to send opaque information, bytes over TCP/IP. You would send some data from one computer to another, and what to do with the bytes was ultimately left to the recipient. Even if this is the most general network protocol, one would have expected someone to come in and build a formalism for network Turing machine. Sadly, we don't live in that world, and sending opaque bytes to each other is just how we do business today. And of course, we built protocols, and we agreed on how to send the bytes. But I think that we, as computer users, lost our ability as wizards to be extremely powerful. When we visit other computational kingdoms, we have to leave our wizard staff at the entrance. And the internet, being built on protocols and then web APIs, I think, has turned into a very inelegant patchwork. And internet users actually accepted being powerless wizards. When visiting a website or building a connection between two internet applications, we've come to accept that, oh, sorry, our web API doesn't support this call, or sorry, the database can't do this joint operation. Hackers lost a lot of their power. And building systems on top of the internet, of course, has been extremely intoxicating, but it sure feels very different from being all-powerful gods into our own private digital garden. And that's what I call the wizard problem. I don't think we can be powerful and coexist at the same time, at least not in the current digital world. If we want to be powerful, we're limited to our own small worlds. We have to resort to personal computing. And if we want to enter the larger world and coexist with other people, we actually must give up our powers. And often that means bowing to powerful mediators that decide what is and what is not allowed. And I think it's very similar to make-believe. In your own inner fantasies, you can choose who you are, you can decide to be whatever you want, and you have ultimately total control. But as soon as you play make-believe, then you can see kids doing that all the time. It's like, oh, I killed you. Oh, no, I have a special shield, you can't kill me. Oh, well, that's not fair, but I have a special gun, so I can kill your special shield. And it's just a big problem, because people have to agree together on how to interact together. You're not on your own. You actually have to give up your power. And I think that inner fantasies is very close to personal computing, and make-believe is a way to think about the internet and sending opaque bytes to each other, and this whole reconciliation problem we have when all that we can do is just send messages. And I think that it makes sense. If primitives are too powerful, it has to be individual, which is why personal computing is essentially being a wizard, but you can't really coexist with other. And on the other side, if you want to have societal computing, you have to resort to message passing, which is, I don't think scales really well. Ultimately, it's just a lot of agreement between people. And I think there is something in the middle. And the story I'm telling today is about how I think we can reach the middle path, and how I think it will unlock a lot of things. But I have to carry you guys on a big journey first. But essentially, the objective is, how can we build a system that would allow all of us to be wizards together, although with limits? And it's a question I've been trying to answer for almost a year now, because we want to be powerful and coexist. Right now on the internet, I don't think this is happening. So Ethereum is an opinionated attempt at building a network of programs. And it has some unique properties that are, in my opinion, changing our relationship with computing. At its core, Ethereum is very simple. It's just like the internet. It's an ecology of programs sending messages to each other. But Ethereum has been designed through, through game theory and other apparatus we don't have to talk about today. Ethereum has a very interesting property, which is the all is on or all is off. Either all programs are running, accepting messages and responding to users' queries, or they're all off at the same time. And this is very much unlike the internet, where part of it goes offline, desynchronized, or gets censored. Creators have to opt in Ethereum to have the ability to turn off smart contracts. Unlike the internet, where someone can always unplug the computer. And I think that Ethereum gives us sovereign computation. Programs with a life of their own. Nobody can unplug them. Their behavior can be frozen in time forever. And their permanence is guaranteed by the network. I like to think of Ethereum as the coming of age of computing. Computers have always been very powerful, but we always had to be there as their mummies and feed them the right thing at the right time and put them in the right conditions to stay alive. And with Ethereum's, programmers have actually graduated to having a life of their own. We granted them autonomy. But Ethereum is not perfect. There's a very bitter lesson in computing about generality. The systems that are the most general are often hard to compose and slow, because sometimes things can be too general. And I think this is very vivid when it comes to machine learning. At first, people had to take one step backward and stop programming symbolically and program with linear algebra instead to unlock all that we have today. So sometimes one has to take a step backward to take 2 steps forwards. And similarly to the internet, programs running on Ethereum cannot edit memories of other programs. And I think this is a very sensible decision if you're trying to build a new financial system. We don't want any program out there to be able to edit someone's balance or change an IOU in a database. And Ethereum has truly redefined a relationship with computers. I think it gave programs a life of their own. But it hasn't done anything to solve the wizard problem. Programs are still passing arbitrary messages to each other, and understanding those messages is still left to the recipient. It's exactly like TCP/IP. And I think we need more fundamental rules. The EVM draws boundaries between different programs. Programs are allowed godlike power into their own memory land, but as soon as they call another program, they have to give up this power and just resort to interfaces, essentially. Send some bytes and have those bytes be interpreted by another program. And so I'm thinking, will we ever have a borderless digital world where humans or programs can visit each other without having to leave their magic staff at the entrance? I think we can, but first, we need to take a little detour in the land of play. I've long been fascinated with the element of play in culture. Writers like Huizinga and Keloa wrote about play as being the primary method of creating culture. And both of them analyzed a lot of our societal constructs as forms of play. And the internet has been very, very generative when it comes to play, embodiment, and role play. We now have the ability to feel embodied with people that are very far away from us geographically. Similarly, the fluid notion of identities on the internet led to a strong burst of cultural creation. We're back to culture being created by the crowd with nameless author, but now the crowd is so much bigger than before. We're not in small villages anymore where a couple of people have to share the same persona. The internet is a massive cultural machine. And I think that the internet, as first and foremost a place to do business, is now behind us. And it seems like we're collectively building towards Homo ludens, man, the player of games. And so now you see where I'm going. I think it makes a lot of sense that people are really excited about the metaverse. But I think that in as much as we're over-indexing on the metaverse as a big video game, similar to how it's very natural for us to be blind to many of our behaviors being ultimately play, outside of the obvious one like sports and board games. I think there's a case for turning the internet into a place. And the metaverse has been attempted by many, Metaplace, Plato, VRML. Lots of people have attempted to do this. And the current opinion is that, oh, we didn't have good enough I/O, we didn't have enough compute, we didn't have enough bandwidth, but today it might be possible. I actually think that the missing factor is we still don't have a good formalism to think about the internet as a place. Just like the internet as a messaging layer for computers leads to the wizard problem, I think that building the metaverse as a messaging layer for big video games is way too reductive. And this is why I think that ultimately we can do way better than big tech metaverse. You see, the big tech metaverse relies on access controls lists, agreements, first-party developers, IP, and a huge amount of content to become interesting. The history of massively multiplayer games actually illuminated the fact that you need a single godlike entity responsible to figure out what is or what is not in universe. And this is a really hard problem for the gods. Worlds ultimately crumble under their own complexity. And user-generated platforms like Roblox actually don't solve any of those problems. It just fragments it to a lot of local gods that have to make those decisions individually, each with their own little kingdom over which they rule. And the wizard problem becomes extremely acute here. Giving any content in a word is, in a sense, arbitrary. This leads to, if you want content to interact from one word to another, it's also an arbitrary decision. Therefore, it cannot be automated. It has to be agreed upon. And so that's what I call transmutation rules. It's just a lot of reconciliation between different entities that have complete control. And you see, if every god of every world needs to sit down at the negotiation table and agree on the rules of transmutation, it gets complicated very quickly. And the amount of decisions that need to be taken grow to the square of the amount of content. And I don't think this can work. And if you're here today, it's because there is an alternative story being told. You see, a world is a future you can believe in, one that survives its creator and keeps on generating drama. And so I think that we must grant autonomy to our worlds. For us to truly unlock the possibility of the internet being a place, words will need to outlast us. They will need to become culture, and culture is authorless. The more credible a word's longevity is, the more you can believe in it. So now you see where I'm going again. An Ethereum native metaverse is a very attractive idea, but what I mean is that just like Ethereum can be seen as the coming of age of computing, an Ethereum native metaverse can be seen as the coming of age of virtual worlds. Through Ethereum, we granted autonomy to programs. What if we grant autonomy to our worlds as well? Because what stronger property a world could possibly want but autonomy? An autonomous world on Ethereum is something that some people have called, oh, crypto-native games, or like on-chain gaming, or whatever. I actually think it goes much beyond gaming. It's about culture and play. And at the risk of sounding a bit controversial here, I think that this goes far beyond the tokens and the NFTs and the DAOs. All those are tools in our quest for longevity, and there is useful coordination mechanism, but they're not the end game. And so for a moment, I will ask all of you to suspend disbelief about what you might have heard as the scaling problem or the blockchain trilemma, and picture a universe where computation and storage on Ethereum is plentiful. From now on, when I refer to a world on Ethereum, I mean a world whose storage and logic and so forth lives entirely on an Ethereum blockchain. This world, by the virtue of being a program on top of Ethereum, can be granted autonomy. It has sovereign computation, and so it can become a sovereign world. No one could shut it down, and it will live for as long as the chain exists. It has a life of its own. Yet we're still faced with the freaking wizard problem. In this case, it manifests as the need for an entity, a company, an individual, a DAO, whatever, to decide what is and what is not in universe. The entity has to decide what the content is, and that fundamentally goes against our values for worlds having autonomy. Like, who do you think is actually wearing the crown here? Is it the world, or is it the developer? So even if the world has been granted autonomy through Ethereum, I don't think this solves the wizard problem. And similarly, visitors of those worlds, they will be limited by the features and by the API. You know, oh, you can't go there, or you can't do that, or this message can't be parsed. And we have the same problems of transmutation. If you want different words to interact together, they will have to agree about what is and what is not in universe. No one actually, but the local God will be able to do engineering inside the world itself. Yes, you can do engineering around the world, you can come and connect to it, but inside the world there will always need to be some sort of entity, even if it's governance, even if it's about like votes and tokens or whatever, there will need to be something that makes decision for the content inside the world. And different worlds will most likely be separated from each other. And of course, institutions will be created. Rule set, values, and lore will become culture. And various entities will decide to create instantiation of those words with different rule sets and different values. But the words themselves, like, they remain separated because there is a dualism between first party and third party. There's a lot of unscalable word that needs to be put into transmutation rules to like say, okay, this thing in that world is that thing in this world. Oh, also a lot of work has to be done into, okay, how do we decide what new thing we put in the world? So essentially, we have this massive problem that will remain as long as we consider some entities to be more permissioned than others. And of course, we can imagine this cheap trick where a first party fills a world with content, discard their admin right, and then say, oh, okay, my world is autonomous now, and like there's no one to control it. But the thing is, with the way we're building worlds today, this will be at the expense of allowing new content to be created inside this world itself. And so, I think a world needs permissionless creation. Because for it to stay alive, there need to be mechanics and principles to let anyone create content that doesn't break the consistency of the world itself. And so, I propose taking a little detour to the most interoperable, composable, adminless world I know of. Our world. Our world works. And I like to think of our universe as a very opinionated computer. And most surprisingly, in our world, we can all be wizards together. We have like a neutral way to coexist, even though we have agency and power as well. We can be powerful and we can coexist. And it's not like we receive an area where we're in total control of space-time and then an invitation to lay our wizard staff at the entrance when we enter other places. I did not have to ask the owner of this place for the authorization for my lungs to work when I stepped in. They just did. And so I think that our world allows us to design, engineer, and create while lacking any form of content. I can build a house. I don't need to choose from a list of houses defined by God. And our world is resistant to bad actors, actually. We have conservation laws, speed of causality, and symmetries that protect us from having an agent on the other side of the galaxy snap their finger and destroy us all right now. Of course, society protects us, but I think society relies on very implicit assumption about what it can and cannot do with matter and energy. I don't think society alone is enough of a guardrail for humanity. See, you can't wish a nuclear bomb into existence. You need 100,000 scientists, a couple $1 billion in 4 years. And our world composes as well. Some engineers can build rockets, we can build cameras, and my camera can take a picture of the rocket and we don't have to agree on standard interfaces or whatever. It just works. And I don't think our world is actually not a regular Turing machine. I think, there's no arbitrary way to write or read memory. There's no buffer overflow in our universe. Physics is not arbitrary either. We can actually derive most of our physics from the Lie group. The universe is first and foremost symmetric, and those symmetries lead to conservation laws. Those conservation laws protect us from space viruses growing indefinitely and other Lovecraftian physical horrors that sometimes keep me up at night. One way to think about it is in terms of magical systems. You can think of Harry Potter, and I claim that Harry Potter is a bad magical system because anyone can come up with a random word in Latin and say, oh, it's in universe. It's the spell to create a turkey. And the only mediator there is J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling gets to step in and say, well, you can do this, but you can't do that. Because Harry Potter magic is just like transmutation rules between different words in the current metaverse paradigm. Everything is game. Whereas I think something like Death Note is much more interesting. You have very specific rules about how to kill someone with a notebook, and they compose so well that it actually creates 2 seasons worth of drama with a couple simple rules that have been very well thought of. And I think we can learn from nature to implement digital physics. And digital physics is an efficient, it's an attempt at building a set of efficient rules for a spatial computer. You can think of it as a spatial virtual machine, or the SVM. Computational agents in this world will be bound to similar conservation laws found in the universe. Things like causality and symmetries and energy conservation. I think digital physics will solve the wizard problem, unlock societal computing, and allow for an open metaverse to bloom into existence. Because, remember, words need autonomy, words need permissionless creation, and words need digital physics. Learning from nature how to build worlds that can be granted autonomy without gods or contents has been on our mind for a very long time now. And I'm very excited to announce Lattice, an external project funded by Xerox PARC to design, build, and research virtual world technologies from the lens of digital physics. At Lattice, researchers and engineers have been quietly working over the past year on radically different ways to build worlds on top of Ethereum. And we have quite a story. We started with a prototype game called Ember as a way to stay on track and verify our ideas practically. Ember is a basic strategy game where players can div caves, recruit monsters, and expand their empire by fighting chess-like battles. Ember was, of course, given it's on Ethereum, fully programmable. Players can deploy contracts in the world to barter the dragon for gold or rent areas in a city. Ember was, in fact, running entirely on top of Ethereum. But the thing is, we first wrote Ember in the very naive first-party focused way, where the core content of the game and its data were controlled by our system, and third-party developers can come and interact with the game through an API. We went really far, actually, with this idea. We attempted adding hooks and other ways for third-party developers to interact with the system way deeper. But I think that starting from an implementation and wishing for composability is a losing strategy. How can Ember be a world one can truly believe in, with a future and a longevity, if there is a dualism between first-party content and third-party content? How can we turn Ember into a world with capital W? How can we give it autonomy and permissionless creation? Building it on top of Ethereum is a step forward because of sovereign computation, but can we go further? And so, learning from our first attempt at building Ember and thinking a lot about digital physics in the process, we developed a bundle of principles, libraries, and tools named MUD. We started from the intention of making worlds adminless and autonomous. No single developer or company should be responsible for defining what an entity can and cannot be in a world. World have no owners. And with MUD, anyone can plant a word seed, but it doesn't give them any more privilege with the world as being its creator. Developers can register components on the world permissionlessly. Components need to, of course, respect some sort of interface, but their implementation is left to the world builders. Think of components as tiny packets of data without logic. Components can then be attached to form entities in this world. And the really interesting thing is entities can contain components from different developers. We have a query system inspired by SQL that allows developers to run queries on the world and get entities back depending on the values of their components. And those components can have been created by different developers. To update the state of the world, builders can write systems that are granted access to certain components, but they can query any components. Of course, we expect most components at first to have a notion of ownership, where their initial creator defines who can and cannot write the state. But we think developers will find many ways in the future to share ownership of components in MUD worlds. And we build a lot of tooling client-side to populate a client directly from the chain and from those components. Essentially, you can think of the open source Lattice client as a browser for any MUD world. And we hope MUD will transform how crypto-native games are built today and how autonomous worlds will be built tomorrow. In the process, we built a bunch of neat things as well. We've been building protocols and tools to address two problems outside the magic circle. So the magic circle in the theory of games is that everything inside the magic circle is playful and things outside the magic circles are not part of the game. And one obvious thing that is outside the magic circle is money, but this is very well addressed with all the work that has been done on top of the financial layer of Ethereum. But we encounter two other problems: identity and distribution, which allows us to work on two protocols I'm going to talk about briefly today. So the address space of Ethereum is plentiful. So how do users discover anything? Well, for regular Ethereum applications, it's mostly through word of mouth. There's no central registry of Ethereum applications because there is no need for one. But while observing Dark Forest and other projects sharing our ethos being built, as well as working on Ember ourselves, we actually noticed the wheel being reinvented multiple times. We think that a database of all worlds, along with their history, is very valuable. And so we decided to build an admin-less database indexing worlds, implementing the MUD interface. It's called the registry. The registry doesn't have an admin. It won't get into your way between yourself and your players. Think of it as just, I don't know, some sort of like public good living there that anyone can use. Anyone can register an instance on the registry along with a pointer to a metadata file or an ABI. It's very similar to how NFTs work. And the metadata can then be consumed by clients downstream to show more specific information about the world. It is open source today and deployed on Gnosis Chain and Kovan. And we hope we're leading the way for others to come and build a shared history with us on top of this registry. Additionally, we've experienced multiple needs in terms of identity that are not addressed with the simple identity primitive of Ethereum being an address. If an address is derived from a private key, you can't transfer it. And if it's owned as a smart contract, it leads to a very awkward user experience. So we built a very simple account abstraction primitive named Persona with a couple of key features. A persona is an NFT you can transfer. And different personas can be selected for each consumer of your identity. You can think of persona as the sign in with Google and then select your account kind of thing for on-chain games or like any on-chain automation applications. And persona has an on-chain authorization tables, which is composable, and it allows for things like identity flash loans or letting your Twitch streamers move your character without withdrawing items from your inventory. It's very powerful and very granular. It's also open source today and deployed on Gnosis Chain and Kovan, and it's deeply integrated into MUD and the registry. So one more thing I want to present today, and it's about user experience. Wallets today preclude the ability to send arbitrary transactions all the time, for obvious reasons, but it makes the user experience of interacting with a world on top of Ethereum very cumbersome. And given Persona's flexible authorization table on-chain, it is actually possible to let users own their identity and their assets with a wallet of their choice, but allow a burner wallet to call certain functions on certain consumers without user confirmation. So this radically improves the user experience of playing those games. And we bundle all those things together, so robust persona management, robust burner wallet management, the ability to export the registry into an app we call the Lattice launcher. It is available today. You can go to the Lattice workshop to use it and also learn a bunch of other cool things I'm going to talk about later. But to conclude, I think MUD removes the first-party, third-party duality, but it is far from solving the wizard problem. We think it's a step forward. I can totally see multiple developers registering a position component on a word and claim they know the real position and they have the ability to write the real position. So who should have a claim on something as basic as physical location? Which position component should a client trust? And I think this problem is very akin to how Ethereum is a general computer, but there is still at its core an unbreakable rule. See, if you can use the EVM, even if you can use the EVM to create any token, there's only one token, Ether, you can use to buy block space. And Ether is issued fairly through staking or mining. So Ether, in a way, is a form of digital physics. It turns a design for personal computing into a design for societal computing. And to wrap this up, I think there is a need for a set of energy-conserving, symmetric primitives existing in all MUD worlds for all creators to play with. And it's a very exciting area of research we're excited to tell you more about later this year. We're hiring for a lot of roles. You can send an email to jobs@lattice.xyz or come talk to me later. I'd like to thank our funders, Xerox Spark and Gnosis Chain, for infrastructure support. And very important PSA, in 30 minutes, we're running a workshop in the workshop room there, where we'll show you how to use MUD, the registry, Persona, and the launcher to build a crypto-native game in 2 hours. Thank you.